Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today is Wednesday, the 4th day of October 2017, and it looks like it's gearing up to be another rainy day today, but we want to be thankful for the rain because there will be many days when we don't get rain as well and when we actually need it. So we want to be thankful for it, even though it may throw some of you off your schedules. It may disrupt some of the activities that you have to do for the day. It may mean that you have to use an umbrella. It may mean that if you're riding on a bicycle, that it's more difficult. But I've seen the people in Cuba riding bicycles with their umbrellas in hand at the same time, so that can be done as well. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy and wet roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record is a show produced by the staff and the management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. And I will interject here that many of you do really appreciate this show, and we have written comments to support that as well. Ms. Teresa's been receiving lots of communications, especially from young people who are listening to this show and who are extremely appreciative of what they have been able to learn on this show. So if you want to be a part of the conversation as well, you're welcome to join me and my co-host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. Normally it's that beautiful radio voice of Miss Susan Watson. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at CANDW.KY. So it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning, along with my co-host, Dr. Steve MacPhail and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. We have MLA, Mr. Kenneth Bryan, who, of course, you know, represents the constituency or the district of Georgetown Central in our Legislative Assembly. So without any further ado, I'd like to go around the table and say good morning to Dr. Steve, good morning to Ms. Teresa, and good morning to Mr. Bryan.
Good morning to you, Mr. For the Record. And good morning to your co-host, Teresa Pitcairn, and good morning to Mr. Bryan, MLA for Georgetown Central.
Okay.
And good morning to all of the For the Record listeners locally and those who are listening abroad. And I would like to say again, this is the read record. These records are not cooked, and they're not manipulated.
Hi, yes, a quick good morning. Since the protocol has already been established, and morning, Mr. Bryan, thank you very much for sharing this time and this space with us this morning. And certainly, I'd like to welcome our wider audience and wishing everyone an awesome week. Yeah.
Mr. Bryan, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record.
Thank you very much. Good morning, OC. Good morning, Dr. MacPhail. Good morning, Ms. Pitcairn. And good morning to everybody who's listening by way of radio and by television eventually.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Maybe one of these days we'll have it live as well.
Yeah. I think we'll get there eventually. But it's a pleasure to be here. I hope to have this more on a regular routine to come and inform, because Radio Cayman has such a wide audience of listeners, and you guys do such an amazing job in informing them about information that is important for people to analyze and know and prepare themselves for for part of the political life and understanding. So for me to be here and be taught, I must say, because this is, like I call in all the time, this is a bit of a classroom, so it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope to be here more often.
Okay. Now, Mr. Brown, I know that you have another commitment, and you're going to leave us probably around about 8:45 this morning. So we want to give you an opportunity to follow your agenda, what some of the things that you want to talk about, because we will have enough time to talk about other things later on.
Okay, well, just to try to get straight into it, much of our listeners may not be aware, but a matter arising employment in the Cayman Islands has popped up over the last few days. Thank you. It was revealed by social media in another media house about a video that was posted on YouTube in respect to what seems to be a rather nice young lady from abroad who was working here in the Cayman Islands for over 1 year. Now that the video and what she said in it has created much controversy. It's rather disturbing for me as well, as a Caymanian and as a representative, and understanding the difficulties that many Caymanians are going through in employment. The video basically talked about how easy it was for her as an expat abroad to apply for a job here in the Cayman Islands without ever even being in the Caribbean in her life. And she goes on to say, basically, she just saw this post online. She sent her resume. She got a call back within a few hours. They did an interview over Skype. She said, she would love to come to the Cayman Islands. She has no experience in the post that they were advertising for, but she'd be happy to try. She admitted on this video on YouTube to say that the boss accepted the fact that she had no experience and allowed her to come down and work. And then she goes on to talk about the fact that she was hired. She got a work permit. She came here, worked really hard, saved loads of money, even though the cost of living is high. And then she's going off now after 1 year working in the Cayman Islands to travel the rest of the world. And she continued on, and this video was just about talking about how great the Cayman Islands is. Now, it was positive in one aspect of exposure, but the underlining factor of the employment, it was disguised in it. At least for those who are not affected by it, it wouldn't seem like a big deal. But it was a big deal for many Caymanians and created a lot of comments. Also in the video, she continued to promote Cayman Islands by way of labor, to say it's really, really easy to get a job in the Cayman Islands. There's so many jobs here. All you got to do is just apply. It's really easy. You can get it within weeks. And for me, it was disturbing because it made me feel like as if to say, it seems that this is evidence. This is admittal by a non-Caymanian worker who talks about what we always are in fear of, to say that non-Caymanians get jobs without no experience, and they get it so easily. But we hear the horror stories of Caymanians who are qualified, experienced, and the like, and it's so difficult for them to get work. I bring up that video because I know it's going to be the talk of the town for today. It was so strong or so vivid in its, what would you call that now, her explanation of what happened, that the comments generated on social media forced her to take it down. Within hours, the whole island was buzzing about it, and then later on we found it was taken down. I'm not sure if anybody was clever enough to capture it before it was taken down, but it almost shows a admittal of guilt by taking it down. It was really raw in its sense, and I hope that I get access to it again, and I think everybody in this country should see it because it's a real life picture into what they go through.
Has anyone been able to verify the accuracy of it, that it is actual genuine video?
From what I saw, there's no reason to believe that it wasn't. And I further heard comments from other individuals to say that via social media that the employer of her apologized for what was said by her. Not sure what he's apologizing for. I wish that was explained.
Letting the cat out of the bag, the worst kept secret in Cayman.
Exactly. So I'm actually trying to later on today find out exactly who the employer is, because I would like to have a candid conversation with that person and say, can you tell me what happened here? Because it's obvious that the employer understands the employment matters or issues that we're having in the country, and how damaging what she said was for Caymanians. So for that to be explained, but the problem is, if he's apologizing, is he admitting that hiring a non-Caymanian with no experience is a problem? Because technically speaking, it's not.
And what would be interesting is to look at his staff, his complement of staff, and see how many Caymanians are actually employed there.
But what I
and
do,
that would probably tell you
a lot.
What in terms of his employment practices, what they're like.
Well, what I do understand is that and I haven't confirmed this, but what I'm hearing is that the employer has a number of companies, a number of restaurants, and it's predominantly, if not 100%, non-Caymanians. So I'm interested to follow up. But for me, this is like that one piece of evidence that everybody keeps on talking about, to go, here it is. This is an admittal by a non-Caymanian about the process. So it's going to be interesting over the next couple of days of discussions. But I bring that up to bring up a matter, which is a motion I'm bringing to the House. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And we all know that the House was expected to resume on the 13th of this month. I'm understanding that may be delayed at least by a week or so. So the 13th probably won't happen. The last I've heard from any official capacity, it looks like it's going to be the following Friday, which would be the 20th. But in that sitting of the House, I intend to bring a motion that I had campaigned on, which is the National Jobs Criteria List. And it sounds confusing just in its title, but the basic premise of it is that my perception of the job market is you cannot rectify the problems within the job market without starting at a baseline. And that baseline has to be decided by a group that is all-inclusive of all the factors in the field, not just by the employer. Unfortunately, there are malicious employers out there who are undermining Caymanians on a regular basis. And sadly, what's going to happen now is there's going to have to be a pressure applied for those bad employers, because there's majority of good employers, I must say that. But for those bad employers who continue to undermine Caymanians, they're going to have to pay the price of going through a filtering process or a more difficult process to hire persons, just to make sure that the Caymanian is protected. And that's what I hope to bring by way of this motion. Now, I'm just going to quickly read it, because I would love to hear some input from the good doctor and Ms. Pitcairn as well.
Sure.
Basically, and this is the draft version, so the wording may be altered a little bit, but it basically says, whereas there continues to be many Caymanians unemployed, and whereas there is much speculation of roguish employers raised by Caymanians, and whereas there is no publicly known job criteria list that is issued by the work permit boards to establish the credentials of the requirements to do any one particular job, be it therefore resolved that the government considers establishing a national list of jobs and their criteria starting from entry level to middle management. Now, why I said only from entry level to middle management, I'll explain in a minute. And it continues on to say, be it therefore further resolved that the government involves private sector stakeholders, human resources specialists, the Labor Department, or the Human Resources Department. Now, I said Labor Department or Human Resources Department because we don't know when that transition is going to be made. We know the Premier suggests that he's going to have a Human Resources Department and eliminate the Labor Department altogether.
Some work has been started on it as well.
Exactly. So, and continues on to say, and be it further there resolved that once the national list is created, it becomes a public document to be available for everyone to see on the government website. And be it further resolved that the government issues the directive that the list is a mandatory requirement to be used in establishing if a Caymanian has the credentials for a post an employer is requesting for a work permit. Now, I think we can go on to what exactly this is trying to establish after you take the first break,
Okay.
because it's going to be a long-winded one,
Certainly, yeah.
unfortunately.
Yes. So we have to take a commercial break now, folks. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I have in the studio with me Dr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Teresa Pitcairn, and MLA Mr. Kenneth Bryan, who represents Georgetown Central in our Legislative Assembly. Before I pass the mic back to Mr. Bryan, I just want to say a few days, maybe about a week ago, I was at my most favorite location, and I was talking to a young man who had lived in the UK, married over there, has a family and everything, and I was there talking with him. When youngsters go away, they have a tendency to pick up the accent of the country that they're living in for a while. So he mentioned the fact that he was going to look a job, and he was going to do, had his interview scheduled and everything, and he had his pretty heavy British accent, and I said to him, young man, let me give you one piece of advice. You see the way that you're talking now with your British accent? When you go on that interview, you talk the same way. Speak the same way with that British accent, because you have a 99.99% better chance of getting that job. Now, it is unfortunate that I had to give such advice, but in reality, that was the case. So we'll go back to Mr. Bryan now, and we'll talk about his private member's motion. And I think you wanted to get some feedback from Dr. Macfield and Ms. Teresa on it as well.
Yes. The premise of this motion, a matter of fact, I'll add it on afterwards, because I think the motion is somewhat self-explanatory. I must say the wording could be addressed a little bit, and I'm going to tighten that up before it reaches the floor of the House. But I think we get the gist of it. But the questions that need to be asked about who makes the final decision on whether a person is qualified to do any one job. That's the crux of the employment problem in this country. And I know that many employers are probably going to be really upset with me, but the truth is, that decision is solely in the hands of the employer. Mm-hmm. Now, in a perfect case, then that's the way it should be, because I believe an employer should have as much leeway as possible to decide whose workers they are. But with the current environment with unemployment, particularly for Caymanians, there needs to be some of that responsibility needs to be pulled back, because you have too many claims of misbehavior in respect to not making sure that Caymanians get our opportunities. So hence the reason why a motion like this is having to be brought to the House in the first place. So ultimately, what I am just saying is, let us all decide, all together, all stakeholders, public, the community, specialists involved, private sector, government, and decide what it is and agree to that, so that there's no misunderstanding of what is required, regardless who applies for the job. And as long as a Caymanian meets that requirement, you can't say, well, boy, a Caymanian didn't make it. Because when particularly you've been in the work permit in respect to the boards and approvals already, and most cases it's the employer that says, I haven't found a Caymanian. And it's unless a Caymanian comes up and say, well, I have, they can still fight that and say, well, that's not what we want.
Yes.
Who decides it? Because a person can say, I need a gas pump attendant who knows chemistry and have a doctorate in chemistry because we deal with fuel. But is that realistic? And we have to get rid of that process, and by way of all agreeing to what the standard is in any one post. So that's the premise, and I think that's the best way to solve the underlying issues with unemployment for Cayman. So I'll take the input in respect to Dr. Macfield and Ms. Teresa.
Well, Kenneth, I disagree with you. I think the crux of the employment problem in this country was the time and the date that we allowed our politicians to scrap the Caymanian Protection Law 1971 and the spirit that for which it was founded. 4.5 decades ago, the people who founded this modern economy in Cayman Islands brought a law to give us protection from the very issues that we are boiling today that is now escalated to a point where we have no control. They saw that 4.5 decades ago, and they were very wise. If you read the Hansards, if you do the hard intellectual slog, and you read the Hansards, you will see those great men, Mr. Craddock, Benson Ebanks, Warren Conley, and all of those men. They saw this mirror. They saw this picture. They knew that this was going to happen once you open up the place to economic prosperity, that we want to be overrun by people, and they formed the Cayman Protection Law to protect us. We along with the greedy investors that came in, sided against the Caymanian people and scrapped that law and threw it to one side, and the Caymanians had no protection for a long time. And then in 2009, when we got the constitutional order, the Cayman constitutional order, if you get the records of the talks,
yes,
of the constitutional
the
minutes of the talks, you will see that the protection of Caymanians came up in that very, very important, very significantly. And as a result of that, the constitutional drafters were able to instill in the Constitution Section 16 of the Constitution of the Bill of Rights, which gives the Caymanian people, the Caymanian legislature, the right to regulate who comes in the country, who leaves, what kind of business they can do in the country, what kind of employment they can take up in the country. And it gives the Caymanian legislature and the Caymanian people the right to say what jobs, whether a job is for Caymanian only, and whether being Caymanian is a qualification to get a job. And not one of the legislators I have seen done anything about that. That constitution has been in force now since 2009. And not one, in fact, one of the members of the government were here a couple of weeks ago, and I brought that to his attention, and he did not even know that was in the Constitution. And so what you don't need at this particular stage motions. You need to amend the law to implement the highest law in the land, which is the Constitution of the Cayman Islands, that gives us, you and the other legislators, the right to protect us, to protect Caymanians from all of these things that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, what his private member's motion would, if accepted and implemented by government, would require amendment to the immigration law, either that or the executive to issue directives or regulations. I was reading something in a court case. Oh, we need a break now. So I was waiting for Ms. Susan to give me that signal for the 8 o'clock break. So I'll elaborate on what I was going to say as soon as we return from the news. Folks, please stay tuned. Don't change that dial. Listen to the 8 o'clock news on Radio Cayman. And after the 8 o'clock news, For the Record, we'll be back. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, and our guest this morning, Mr. Kenneth Bryan, who's the MLA representing the constituency of Georgetown Central in our Legislative Assembly. Mr. Bryan has to leave us at around 8:45, so we want to give him as much time as possible to talk about some of the subjects that he wishes to talk about. I would just like to remind our callers that we would want you at this point in time to limit your discussions to Mr. Bryan's conversation, and if there's anything else that is not related to that, you can call in after 8:45 and we can talk about those things as well, because I know that there are some callers who want to talk about things that are totally unrelated to anything that we're talking about, Mr. Bryan.
And there's a lot of those things that need to be talked about, so I totally understand, and I do appreciate the callers being patient with me. Going back to the discussion about the national jobs criteria list that I proposed in my motion, Mr. Macfield was highlighting some interesting points about the Cayman Protection Board, and I agree with him. We had some missed opportunities, and there is different avenues upon which to ultimately get the outcome that you want, which is more protection for Caymanians and from an employment standpoint, because we must all agree that employment is the number one key to success, because obviously that's how you make money, and you make money to survive in order to live, eat, and provide for your family. So I think employment should be right there next to education as their two top priorities, our two most important issues for the country. And all I'm trying to establish here is a better, stronger protections for Caymanians, and I think this way is one of them. I'm definitely open-minded to taking advice from Dr. Macfield, because obviously we all know that he's the master of the Constitution here in the Cayman Islands, and there's so much I can learn, and I definitely will be having some conversations with him, and I hope to also have conversations with Ms. Pitcairn. They're both well read attorneys and can advise me. I am a young politician, but by all means I'm going to use any avenue that is available to me. But I think it's important that we highlight the fact that there is a balancing act. Sometimes I personally would have at that time understand changing the name of Cayman Protection Board, because it gives a level of division. But I understand that in this environment today, people are calling for more in favor of Cayman protection, because nobody has been standing up for Caymanians over a large period of time. I don't want this motion to come off as beating up on the business community, but to try to give that balance back, equal siding, because I don't think it's for some time now it's been in favor of Caymanians. I don't know. However the process works, it's not been working well enough. We hear too many claims on a regular basis of Caymanians not getting their fair opportunities. Matter of fact, if it was going to be imbalanced, it's supposed to be in favor of the Caymanian as opposed to anybody else. So the intention here is just to get that equilibrium again, not to try to upset the apple cart or the business community. I know it's a difficult job in this business environment already, and employment is one of the key areas for success for any business. But we have to also take into consideration the protection of Caymanian opportunities and survival, because you can have a great business, but if Caymanians are not surviving, that business will be affected in the long term. Because if we continue down this route of not protecting Caymanians, it's only a matter of time before the people will start to revolt and turn on our communities, and then creates a bad business environment altogether. So look at it as protecting your future investment from that standpoint. But I'm keen on hearing what Ms. Pitcairn would like to contribute in respect to my thinking, in respect to this motion and what I intend to do.
So there are two thoughts that come to mind. In the 70s and the 80s, Caymanians were actually employed by the private sector. In fact, Caymanians actually built the private sector. The excuse that we were stupid, that we were spineless, that we were incapable of learning, you never heard that. And I know this from my own personal experience, because the minute I graduated from high school, I went to work at Royal Bank, all populated by Caymanians, and they ran a really tough ship. So I know what Caymanians have done, and I know what they're capable of doing. Something changed at the end of the 80s and in the 90s, where the narrative was suddenly Caymanians were stupid and they can't perform. So I don't know what happened. I don't know how our DNA was transformed. So that's one comment. The other thing with respect to what you're trying to achieve, I think I'm not quite sure if I actually agree with that. And here's the reason why. We have the immigration law that's been around for a while, and it's very clear. It's very, very clear about who should have first opportunities for employment. The reason why that is never or rarely enforced is because our politicians have handlers. So the board, for one thing, is never ever going to be penalized for doing a bad job. So that's one thing. And you really can't blame the board per se, because I don't even think that they're paid to do that job.
Agreed.
So there's
They do get a
They
sort
get
of
a
a
stipend.
stipend, as well as the chairpersons as well.
Wow.
At one point in time when I was in immigration, the chairperson got additional pay because they would have appointments with people. They would have an office at the immigration department, and they would make appointments, see people as well. So they got paid additionally for that also.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they're paid, and what service do we get in return? So I have issues with the board, as I've said, because the level of accountability isn't there. It's a quasi-judicial, they perform a quasi-judicial function, and it's not performed in accordance with our law, because if they actually enforce the law, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
Agreed.
So that's the one thing. But they will only do what they do is based on directives that they get from the sitting government. So if the sitting government says, be flexible, don't do this, don't do that, they're more than likely to do what they're being told to do. So if the government actually sets the stage about their performance, we then have to go right back to the folks that we actually go and put that X for. Whether we're tired, whether we're sick, whether it's rainy, we make that time, because the Caymanians usually come out and vote. It's something that we take very, very seriously. So we vote for folks to actually do what is in our best interest, and we are now seeing the outcome at the end of the day. You talk about it being a balancing act, you're right, because you have to actually balance the needs of the business community and the needs of the Caymanian community. We all know that. Every day when I come on to this show, I talk about an honest conversation that we need to have, because you cannot marginalize folks who are here, who have their lives here, and they get up every morning and seeing only people that don't look like them, that don't speak like them, that they are the person that are being given fair opportunities, right? And the kind of requirements that the Caymanians have. And I even tell my children, I don't want you to be good. I want you to be 10 times better than, because I don't want you giving anybody the excuse that, you're not coming up, you're not delivering, you're not performing. So those are some of the concerns, and I don't care what you take to the court, to the LA, about changing the legislation. It will only be useful if people are willing to honestly implement the law. Now, implementing our law requires courage and integrity, and I keep talking about the handlers that our politicians have, and it goes back to the point that the conversation we were having during the break, OC, about folks who say that they're independent when they're not really independent. So all of us have to be really honest. And me, I speak my truth. And my family and I have paid a very high price in this community for me speaking my truth consistently.
Truth to power.
Yeah, and I walk the walk. I walk the walk, and I pay the price for walking the walk. So I am a realist, so I don't think anything that you're going to bring to our NLA will worth any salt, because we do not have a history of enforcing the law.
Okay.
And folks who do it don't have any kind of accountability.
Okay. We have to take a commercial break now, and we have a few callers. We have a few emails that have come in as well. So please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, MLA Mr. Kenneth Bryan, who represents the constituency of Georgetown Central in our Legislative Assembly, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. We have two callers. We're going to ask each caller to be as brief as possible, because Mr. Bryan will be leaving us in about another 12 or so minutes. So first caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Good morning, caller. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Something happened.
Yes, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, caller. What about the second caller? Okay, Mr. Bryan, I think we've lost those callers. Hopefully they'll come back. You want to respond to Mr. Teresa.
Okay, so just as quickly as possible, and I thank Ms. Pitcairn for her input. And just not to respond, but just to comment on some of the things she said. She was talking about the fact that the board members only are allowed to do what? they're instructed to do by the government that's in power. And I agree with that. Hence the reason that in one of my...
Well, I think that's, is that what you said? That's limited to in terms of, because they have to follow the law. And if they have been given directives, normally they come in the form of directives.
Yeah, but what she was saying is that if they don't follow the law, they're not penalized. So there's no pressure on them.
Yeah, okay.
And I agree with you 100% with that. Now, hence the reason that in the motion at the very end, it says that be it further resolved that the government issues a directive that the list is a mandatory requirement to be used in establishing if a Cayman has the credentials for a post an employer is requesting a work permit for. Now, if that directive is given, then and they go outside of that, if this is passed, we'll see whether or not the government is truly wanting to put the pressure on to make sure to protect Caymanians. So there's a level of we may sit here and say, well, okay, boy, Kenneth, this mightn't be as successful as you want. But there is an ultimate strategy here. I'm going to bring the motion. If it does not succeed, the question you have to ask yourself is, why not? What is the government's excuse for not doing this? And if they choose not to decide to put this pressure and this directive on the boards to take more a stronger approach to make sure to secure Caymanians getting those jobs, then we really know where the government position is in respect to Caymanians' employment. So there's a strategy here. And not only that, they have to respond in respect to this motion of what it's calling for and the acknowledgement of what the realities is in the job market. So I think this clears up the gray area. Also, making sure I'm going to be definitely reading the immigration law a lot stronger in my deliberations when I present it. So, but I'm not going to give away all of that. But the other part is, are we acknowledging by the lack of enforcement of the laws that are currently there that there is potential chance that there's corruption going on, and that's what a major contributor to why Caymanians are not getting the opportunities they have? Because in my view, if there is roles and responsibilities of officials in any capacity, and they're not doing it or bypassing it in some capacity, they have to be doing it for a reason. And for me, that's a problem if they don't enforce it and allow opportunities for Caymanians to be passed. But I understand we have a caller.
Yeah, we have the caller back. Now, caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Great. All right, let me be quick because I have 4 suggestions.
Okay.
All right, let me read them all. All employers will be required to post their jobs to the employment website. See, from CEO position straight down to minimum wage. Secondly, Caymanians applying for jobs should apply through that department. If they choose to apply directly to the business place, they should send a copy of their applications and their resumes to the department, to the employment department, whatever they want to call it. 3, if the business owner chooses to hire the expat, the application of the expat must be sent to the employment department with all necessary documents, resume and everything else, where the department can evaluate it to see if there was a Caymanian who applied for the position that was better qualified. 4, if the expat is given a work permit in lieu of that, is given a work permit and is awarded it, a fine, and the department finds that there's a Caymanian who applied for that position who is better qualified or just as qualified as the expat, a heavy fine should be posted to that employer, and the work permit limited to 1 year. If the work permit goes beyond a year, the work permit should be limited for 1 year to where that situation can be rectified, where a Caymanian will take over that job. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, caller.
If the caller can hold on, because you see, I think that we're missing a very important point in this, is that we have to establish who makes the decision if a person is qualified. Because what he just suggested, and by all means, I think that some of his suggestions are good, but he's saying let the employer send the criteria or the job description And so we can compare it. Compare it to what? To what the employer has said that the requirements are? The fact is that it's the employer that's deciding what the requirements are. Now, I know that sounds rough, but the fact is we have seen many, many examples of them making malicious criteria for jobs that you go, come on, man. Somebody who with a simple high school education can do that job. And if employers continue to do that for malicious reasons, whether they want to hire somebody else or they want to hire somebody cheaper, we have to take away that responsibility from you.
Okay. One of our listeners has said every MLA should encourage every Caymanian that applies for a job to bring them a copy of the application. Then the MLA should personally deliver it to the work permit board. Another of our listeners has said it is a sad truth that OC was right when he told someone that his chances of getting a job would be greater if he spoke with a foreign accent. In other words, don't reveal your Caymanian roots. Even sadder, I gave similar advice recently. There is a perception that in the last few years, laws are being made to facilitate the rights, wishes, and opportunities of foreigners. Isn't it time to bring back, the Caymanian protection element of the immigration legislation? In my view, unless the government gets to grips with the work permit situation and finds a way to get all able-bodied Caymanians back in the workforce, homelessness, poverty, and crime will escalate and our society will continue to deteriorate. It seems government has lost sight of what made Cayman such a desirable and successful financial and tourism destination.
Well, I think the person has it on point.
On point, yes.
I just think that we have to understand that the crux of where the problem comes in is who decides who is qualified for what post. And there's one part of this that I did not highlight in the motion. The fact that one of the resolutions is that it only deals with entry-level jobs up to middle management.
Yeah.
And some people may not agree with that. Some people may say, well, Kenneth, if you're going to do this straight across the board. And I'm trying to create a balancing act because by all means, employers need to have as much decision-making power as possible to decide their own employees and the likes. I think that after middle management and above, the decisions are not as much so about the qualifications, but more so about the connection with the employee. Because, say, for instance, you may have a person who wants to manage a shop. The person may have the same qualifications as another person, but it's about feeling that trust level to say, can I go off on vacation for 2 months and know that that person is taking care of a business? I think entry level to middle management is reasonable expectation to have that balancing act to say, okay, then we have to agree what this is. You can have more discretion in respect to who is qualified and who's not qualified for middle management up, because I think employers should. But in respect to middle management and below, we have to set what that standard is and all agree to stick to that.
Okay, do you have time for one more call before you go in, Mr. Bryan?
Yeah.
Okay, let's grab the call, Ms. T. We'll come back to you. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. Excellent discussion as usual.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a few points to the considerations there. And that is one of the problems which Caymanians have not been able to face is the reality that we need to define or redefine ourselves, personal and professional and otherwise. Because, back in the 60s, 70s to the 80s, we were naive. We were innocent, we were naive, we were not exposed to the world. And, the big countries, people from the big countries perceived that as being, as the early explorers probably did, as being stupid and vulnerable and gullible. So we were all smart enough. We've all progressed beyond that. But we have to redefine ourselves. and tell the world, tell the employers, tell each other and ourselves that we are capable of anything, any challenge that we have to face. And the second point that I wanted to make, which I've heard repeated in a few occasions in media, is people are saying, "Oh, we have to control the demand for cheap labor." In my mind, that is looking at the wrong end of the problem. It's like saying we're going to control the demand for cheaper gas. There will always be a demand. What we need to look at is to control the supply of cheap labor.
Yes, good point.
Because as long as there's a supply, people are going to grab it up.
Okay.
So I'll leave you with that and have a good day.
Thank you very much, caller. We have a few more callers queued up there, Mr. Bryan, but I know you.
I know
Miss
Pitcairn wanted to say
have
something.
to go, yeah. Okay, we have to take a commercial break, which means we may end up holding you here a little bit longer.
All right, I'll take a risk if I'm late for that matter. Then.
Okay, so we'll take a commercial break. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, and our guest, Mr. Kenneth Bryan, MLA for the constituency of Georgetown Central. He has extended his time even though he has another commitment as well, and we're going to try to take 2 more calls before he leaves. And as usual, we asked the callers to be as brief as possible, and we want them to basically try to restrict their questions or comments to the issue that we're talking about. Good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello,
good morning.
good morning.
We're hearing you.
Okay, good morning. Morning, Kenneth. Morning, Steve, OC, everybody in the studio.
Morning.
Morning.
I'll keep it brief. No, we cannot fix the problem of unemployment or the ostracizing of Caymanians until we get these recruitment agencies in check, because it's foreigners recruiting our people, and the blame tends to fall on the employer, but the employer is under limited resources and they are entrusting these recruitment agencies to find the best fit for them. That is not what's being done. The recruitment agency is the one that's deciphering and saying, well, we want this guy instead of this Caymanian. And that's who they push towards the employer. So that's my piece. Rein in the recruitment agencies because they're getting rich off of ostracizing Caymanians.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that, caller. Let's take the other caller, Mr. Bryan, and then you can respond to both. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Pleasant good morning to everyone there. Chief, Mr. McPhee, Mr. Bryan, Mr. Pickering. I couldn't help but call for the very, very, very first time. I would just want to ask one question first. Is work ethic something you can teach? And you can answer that in a minute. But I wanted to say, as we are trying to protect our Caymanians, young people for employment and so on, and trying to put in place different things to meet the criteria and make it more difficult for the expats to come in and get a job and manipulate the workforce. It's very important. As I just left one of my daughter's school to see, people coming into school late, that kind of stuff. I mean, this whole thing begins from home, from very young childhood stage, where we teach the importance of being on time for work, and it's just different basic things of life to be effective in a job place. You can't have people come in being employed, working in a job place, and they're just not being an asset to your business place. It's also tough on the employer to have to be forced to hire people that in a very short time will just completely cause your business to be in limbo of making progress. I mean, right now I am in the middle of teaching a young Caymanian a trade in what I do, and I'm doing that. And it's not the first time I'm doing this. I do this on a regular basis, and because I want to see the young Caymanian, especially the young men, get involved in the workforce. So I am pro Caymanian as far as that is concerned. But it has to be where people are understanding the importance of holding a job and to perform in every which way possible to be effective in a job place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, caller, for that very good point. One last call, Mr. Bryan, they keep coming in. Caller, good morning. Please be as brief as possible.
Yeah. Morning to the host and morning to MLA. Brian, it's Johan Moxham.
Good morning, sir.
Jumping straight into it, sir. I heard what you were saying. I think I understand where you're going, and you're to be commended for that. But couldn't we as a country just all agree on one basic thing, or couldn't the 19 MLAs agree on, unless you enforce existing laws and regulations, it really doesn't make any sense to add paper to the volumes of laws in the Cayman Islands that are ignored. At the end of the day, laws are respected in every other country. Standards are respected, but in Cayman there's a moving goalpost for everything, it seems. So why can't we just implement and enforce the immigration law and the regulations that go along with that, that govern how people are supposed to get a chance and get a work permit and get opportunities? I've sat on the business staffing planning board. The fact that you can have Caymanian applicants and they can just say to you that that applicant wasn't suitable, shouldn't we require or ask for interview notes or something to verify the types of questions and the positions that the Caymanian candidate was put in, if at all they were given an opportunity? Not everybody in a work permit is a savior or an expert, and not every Caymanian is simple, lazy, and doesn't want to
Agreed.
work. There's a balancing act to be done, but it starts with good governance and administrative law, whereby our legislators and cabinet demand that the immigration law and the relevant regulations are enforced that will give everybody a fair chance.
Thank you very much, caller.
Have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Brian?
Just stick a pin. And I agree with Johan, and it's consistent with what I was saying. The public service management law is clear. Caymanians must get the first opportunity once they pass the test. The public authority law, the Caymanians must get first opportunity. The immigration law, Caymanians must get first opportunity. And the thing is, if we don't, I keep harping back to what Tara said, Minister Tara Rivers, because it gave me some hope that we are now getting to the stage where we're now thinking about being creative and giving Caymanians proper opportunity. If we're giving the private sector so much grief about not employing Caymanians, what about the public service? What about the government service? Are they also doing the same thing by giving Caymanians the first opportunity once we take the risk on foreigners who are not qualified and give them the jobs, but we don't want to take the risk on our own Caymanians who have similar or superior experience and accreditation and give them the opportunity.
Okay, Mr. Brian, we're going to give you an opportunity to respond to all of those because we know you have to leave.
And Teresa, thank you for that input. And I think that you see how many levels of protection we have within the laws, but none of them outline the foundation based on who is qualified for what. There is no standard, there's no baseline to say how we make the decision. Is it just based on the fact of a bunch of people on the board to say, in my opinion? Where is the specialist input and decision on who is supposed to be qualified for what? Because I've asked board members to say, how do you decide whether a Cayman is qualified for the job? Based on what? Based on your experience? Based on what? Who decides it? Who put the input into making that decision? And does a Caymanian know whether they're qualified? You may think that you're qualified to do a job, and the board thinks differently. We have to establish something nationally to say this is the accepted norm to be a gas pump attendant, so everybody knows where we stand. And until that happens, it doesn't matter how many protection laws you have in there, it still comes down to a decision which is subjective. That's the bottom line, and this is what this is establishing. We have to nationally, with the private sector involved, employers, employees, government, the departments, all sit down and go through every single job in this country and to say, you want to be a doctor? Here's the qualifications under the law.
And they say they do so we have two lawyers in here, and they have to have to go through qualifications, PQE, and whatever else it is. They have to have all of that.
And most jobs,
all decisions are subjective at the end of the day. So this won't achieve what you want, Kenneth. Honest conversation between the private sector and you guys, an honest one, Kenneth, because you all want the same thing: a community that is safe and enjoyable for everybody.
Well, I disagree. I don't think that my motion will not accomplish anything. I know one thing it will do is open up the dialogue to the conversation.
Yes.
That in itself is also beneficial.
Yeah.
So I'll say this.
I agree.
In most cases, where persons have to be certified through certain authorities, it's easier for them. They have the protection by the authority. In order to be a lawyer, you have to go to the Bar Association. In order to be an electrician, you got to have a certification by the Electrician Board, and plumbing and the likes. But all of those that don't have an authority, there is no who makes the decision whether you're qualified or not. And until we have that established for all the jobs, we're going to have the same problem, because political influence will happen in respect to boards. I'm not saying that I'm accusing anybody now, but by all means, if the board that is selected by this administration gets a directive down from the current administration and say, listen, make sure this happen, you think they're going to say no? We talk about that all the time. And until there's something that we can hold them accountable to, say, listen, here's the list. You didn't follow this list that we all in the room, all the persons that are affected by this have decided on. Why didn't you go by this list? This Cayman presented, look, they gave me the document. I see the national list here. It said these requirements. The Caymanians showed me their resume. I see that they've met the requirements. Why did you work?
And what that would also do, it would reduce the possibility of employers or potential employers making an advert and an application for a particular person that they have in mind for the job, to ensure that they exclude everybody else. But only includes that person.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so by all means, I'm not saying that this is the saving grace, but in respect to my abilities, in respect to my position, I'm going to use the skill sets that I have to try to highlight. By all means, the government can most likely, OC, Alden not going to accept it. He's going to tell his members don't vote for it. I know that. But what we're going to see, though, is the country is going to see why they chose not to. They're going to have to explain to the people, and not me, why they choose not to go forward with this, because we see the benefits and potential benefits that is involved here. So if they choose not to, I will hold them account, because 2021 is right around the corner. So that's the only intention. I apologize.
That's okay.
For both attorneys, thank you so much. I will be calling you and nagging you. Both you've put yourself out there to help assist me in advice. Dr. Macfield, remember you told me that. So I will be calling you.
I just want to ask you one question before
Yes,
you
sir.
go,
Go right
before you
ahead.
leave. When are you going to engage the Georgetown Central constituency to select a district council and send to the cabinet to ask to be appointed?
Well, I am waiting on some feedback from the premier. I've had conversations with him, and I don't want to get it wrong. And I'd rather take the licks from yourself in respect to saying, well, when you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, because you do that, and that's fine. I appreciate that. But what's going to happen is if I don't do it right, you'll be the first person to get up here and say you did it wrong. So I'm going to be patient. I'm going to take a little skill set I got from Alden is be patient, wait.
But what does he have to do with it? He's not the one that selects the district committee.
Well, actually, if I was to follow the law that you repeat so often on here, he actually is the person who appoints based on my recommendation. And if he's unwilling to accept it because they don't believe in the current form, and then I select one, then it's be unconstitutional.
Then you should go to court.
Well, I agree. You said. All right.
Because because his decision would be ultra wise of the Constitution.
So what I'm
you know, Kenneth, just let me.
He doesn't have a whole lot of time left.
Just let me say.
Yes, sir.
Not everybody who stands up on a platform for politics is suited or well prepared for the legislative process. As my colleague has said, you have a clean slate. You are a clean slate, and you don't have anything written on it. You're a blank piece of paper, and I would hope that you try to you do the intellectual slog, and you prepare yourself for what the Legislative Assembly and nation building means.
That's why he's coming. That's why he's going to come to you guys and enlist you guys in that process.
We are not European. We are not European because we have said so many times on this radio show that we're willing to help them, but we're not European.
Gotta go. Have to go to the news,
and we don't speak with the English accent.
Have to go to the news, Mr. Brian.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate you for inviting me on. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And to the listening public, God bless the Cayman Islands and God bless each and every one of you.
Okay, folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after headline news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Unfortunately, MLA Mr. Kenneth Bryan had to leave for another commitment. Actually, he stayed longer than was anticipated, so we want to thank him for that as well. We don't have any calls on hold at this point in time, so we will continue the discussion, and I believe this is a good opportunity for us to segue into the Caymanian protection law. And I recall when the change was being made from the Caymanian protection law to the immigration law, some MLAs said that the Caymanian protection law, the name at that time, was a misnomer because it wasn't designed to protect Caymanians, and they were wrong, 150%, 200% wrong in that regard. When you look at the Hansards of the Legislative Assembly and we look at the introduction of that legislation, when we look at the Cayman Islands at that point in time, the employment situation in Cayman, and when we look at what had happened in other jurisdictions, we know now, and we knew then, why the framers of this law decided to put it into place. There was no accident that they choose the Bermudan protection law, which was crafted along the lines of the Swiss immigration law, all designed to protect the local inhabitants, the citizens, the indigenous peoples of those jurisdictions. That was what was intended when we introduced the Caymanian protection law. And the contents of the Caymanian protection law will show you that that is exactly what was intended. Now, there were unintended consequences of that as well, and one that we can point to is the 1977 amendment to the Caymanian protection law that spoke to persons born in the Cayman Islands, and the fact that if you were born in the Cayman Islands, you had to have one parent who was Caymanian and both parents who were domiciled in the Cayman Islands. And we see the repercussions of that today with some persons who were born in the Cayman Islands have Caymanian parents who may have obtained Caymanian status since then, and they themselves do not necessarily possess Caymanian status now. But the whole intent of the introduction of the Caymanian protection law, that it was designed to protect Caymanians.
Exactly, and if you look at the Hansard, if you look at the debates in the Legislative Assembly, you'll see that one of the primary area of protection was to protect the economy from being transferred into the hands of people who were not Caymanians. And in fact, some of the debaters said one of the main reasons for the protection law was to curb the influx of people from other jurisdictions. Why, when we open up the country economically to at an economic viability, to curb them from coming in and taking over and pushing us out of the economic system. And that is the reason why you had the 60-40%. If you want to come here and if you want to do business, it had to be 60-40% Caymanian. And I never forget the slogans. I hear them in the day when I go to sleep at night. Mr. Warren Conley saying, Cayman is not for everyone. Cayman is not for everyone. And that is true. And now the problem that we have now is Cayman has been overrun. What we've done, we allow people to come here and to set up their businesses just for the greed, for their own personal greed, and then bring in people from other countries to enhance their own wealth without any respect for the Caymanian people who are living here. And the Caymanian, the people of that era, the people of 4.5 for the people of four and a half decades ago were great men. Were great men of stature. They foresee the future. They could see what was happening around them. They read the mirror and they saw what was happening around them. And today we do not have that kind of people in the legislature. We don't have that kind of men anymore. Those kind of nation building people anymore. All we have now is people who are afraid to stand up, are afraid to say how they feel, and they are all not independent. They all have handlers, and it seems to me that they have forgotten the Caymanian people because they don't need them anymore now. They don't need the Caymanian people anymore now because they can get cheap labor from Asia, from every place to come in to do the work. And what they're doing now is taking the work permit money, using the work permit money now to keep Caymanian people on welfare.
Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to say that when we talk about the whole idea of employment, we should also take into context the fact that it's the foreigners that come here and make an investment and they take the risk, number one. So, and they must know what they need for their businesses to be a success, which is why I took some exception to what Kenneth was saying when he says who employs people and, what is the criteria. The people who are running the business must know what they need to do in order to make their businesses a success. My concern is the balancing act that legislators are required to perform when we take our time to go and put our vote there to empower these folks to represent us, and when they fail to represent us adequately, which is what we're seeing today. And we always blame the private sector about how they're pro-foreigners. Well, charity begins at home. Our government should start to also observe what is required under the Public Service Management Law, under the Public Authority Law, etc., etc. And the concern that I have, and I've said it on this show before, is the level of aggression that you're going to see by Caymanian people who have been ostracized and who do not have an opportunity to live in their own country. I was reading in the newspaper this morning, in the media this morning, about a lawyer that had to endure some kind of physical thing that went on between a lawyer and a young person living on these islands. I say that that's just the beginning of what is to come. And I say it again, we need to have a sensible conversation about the nature of the economy that we have, the kind of economy and community that we want to see evolve. Because if we continue to lie to ourselves that we don't have problems with unemployment, and if we continue to lie to ourselves that we don't have issues with discrimination, what we see, the kind of aggression that we see and the level of theft that we see, that's going to become the norm. That's the concern I have. And is that the kind of community we want to leave behind for our kids?
Okay, we have one caller. Let's see if we can grab that caller before we go to 3 callers. So we can probably take one before we go to the commercial break and then the other 2 afterwards. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As a young person, I guess, my observation is the boards and how they're able to undermine and define our very existence. For me, I'm protesting Pirates Week because there is no further assistance for our heritage. Most of the money that we're earning now is going towards promoting more piracy and less heritage. And I see that as a problem personally. Does anybody else see that? Or is it just still we're just making money and everything is okay? Because I'm seeing a deterioration in things that I should be proud about. I don't think that we are Christian pirates. I think we are Christians and we should deal with our heritage accordingly. What we're actually doing is taking the society and making 2 societies, one of pirates and one of those of the keepers of the heritage. And unfortunately, it just takes one committee to bring this whole disarray. Am I still on?
Yes, we're listening, caller. Go right ahead.
But that's a problem. If the Pirates Week Committee is doing this to us, it was all about promoting heritage, and now it's about promoting pirates. We're Christian pirates. And that doesn't settle well with me.
Mm-hmm.
Who else? I'm going to give my voice to say I am not in agreement with Pirates Week anymore.
Okay. What would you substitute it with? Or you wouldn't have...
See, we should take the money and promote we heritage. We must be the only people in the world that has taken our revenues, embraced a festival, and gradually eliminated ourselves from the picture. That's going to be on us.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be on us again.
Mm-hmm.
I go on?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, caller. We're going to take a commercial break. 2 more callers. We ask you to hold on. For the record, we'll be back immediately after this short commercial break, and we will take your call. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. It's just Dr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Risa Pitcairn, and myself in the studio now. Mr. Kenneth Bryan has left us. We have one more caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I kind of agree with Teresa on something that Kenneth said about what he plans on doing, because I don't think what he's planning on doing is going to have much impact on whether or not a Caymanian gets the job. It will do what he said that he wants to do, well, verify what are the qualifications for the jobs available. But will it stop people who are, will it help Caymanians to get jobs in the end? I don't really think so. I think what would be needed is something, what I think Canada's doing, what they're doing, they do a labor market impact assessment.
Yeah.
And then if at the end of the day, someone is applying for a job, do we have Caymanians who are qualified and are available to do this job? Then that, I think, will prevent a non-Caymanian or a work permit holder from getting a job when there are qualified Caymanians already available to do that job. The question, I think, lies is whether or not Cayman is prepared to be able to say, well, we know how many people in Cayman, we know the qualifications, we know how many people are waiting on jobs, we know, that we have X amount of people already available to do this job. Are they able to do something like that? I think that would be that would have more impact on getting Caymanians back into the workforce and that way. So that's my input.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much, caller, for that. Folks, I'm going to read again, and you may have heard this on For the Record before. I'm going to read it again, and hopefully, maybe one of these days we'll put it up on the Radio Cayman's website or whatever. But this is the Honorable Benson O. Ebanks in 1971 in our Legislative Assembly on the second reading of the Caymanian Protection Law 1971. 1971, 46 years ago, I think.
4.5 decades ago.
4.5 decades ago, that he said these words about the Caymanian Protection Law. The objects and reasons for this bill, by reason of the fact, the advantages offered by many people by taking up residence in the Cayman Islands and the unprecedented prosperity of the tourist industry, there has arisen a grave risk in the social character of the islands, as well as the way of life. The population may be adversely affected by the influx of private and business sectors and other consequential factors. It is sought to enact legislation calculated to control this situation by affording means of protecting the traditional way of life of the islanders by cushioning the impact of the establishment of international business interests and of settlement here by people who formerly had no interest in the public and private affairs of these islands. It is also sought to take advantage of the opportunities to consolidate and bring up to date the laws affecting immigration and deportation. 46 years ago, does it sound familiar?
Yes.
Are we still in the same situation today? I think we have a caller or two callers. Let's go to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, people.
Good morning, sir.
Stanley here. OC, I love that thing you read over there. I'd like to get a copy, and I think it should be distributed to the schools. But what I have to say about this whole thing, we have to come to realization, and face the reality. What we have done over the years, we are set 47 years now we've been in this development. Because I came here in 69, and it started out late then in 70. This is 47 years today, 2017. I know you run out of time here and you don't run me. But anyway, we have created a vacuum, OC. There's no question about it. I mean, on your panel here. If we had actually paid attention and cared for our people and prepared them for all of this work and development coming in here now, we wouldn't have that vacuum created for our people. And I don't know how it happened, but I'll let you know that I'm in the construction business now the same amount of time, 47 years, and I have trained about 15 Caymanians up until the late 80s. I would go as far as saying the mid-90s, and that was the end of it. From there on in, no Caymanian parents wanted their children to work in the construction industry. And I will tell you this now, the construction industry and the development and whatever that goes along with the real estate is the third leg of our economy. And we did not get recognition from the government. I don't know if we even got any now so far. We've never been recognized, and that's why this industry went to the dogs. It's still going to the dogs. Mm-hmm. If we had put up institutions and trained them, they would have been there to work. They would have been there now to create that, to fill that vacuum, but they're just not there. One more thing before we
very quickly.
I hear Mr. Kenneth. Mr. Kenneth is asking who makes the decision, who is qualified. Let me tell you, go back in the 80s. The Canadian carpenters came here, and OC, they pull out a little ticket out of their wallet, qualified carpenter, and they came in different categories. We don't have that. What we need to do is to get our people with diplomas and with the certificates, and then when they go to these establishments, that is who are qualifying them themselves. Okay? I say no more. I give someone else another chance because I know you run out of time. But
thank you very much, caller.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller, we're going to ask two last callers to please be brief because they're going to be the final calls for the morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Three Musketeers.
Good morning.
Wonderful words there from Mr. Benson.
Yes, sir.
Powerful words. And also Ms. Teresa and Dr. Steve. You will see. We are closing the gate long after the horse got out. Mr. Benson must have read Mr. Ian Fleming's famous quote, where he said that the prickly sake, the roads have been built, the tourism is here, and we've got rid of the mosquitoes, and the staunch, cheerful Caymanians, the greatest feature of these islands, will be little changed by all this traffic until the modern day pirates arrived. And that is what has happened. We have changed ourselves to fit in, many of us, and therefore we have almost split up ourselves, turned against our own people and keeping them out, succeeding. I'm much afraid that all that the National Trust land and so forth will be, Dr. Steve, the reservations for the indigenous Caymanians. They have land in every district, what used to be the 5 districts, so, and in Cayman Braga also. And as you mentioned some time ago, that's what we might end up being. I am absolutely certain we will end up being like that on reservations. The land is there now. The National Trust has it. Much more than enough for us.
Okay, thank you very much, caller, for that. Let's grab the last caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
First of all, let me say congratulations to having this kind of conversation. This is what we need, but then that needs to be followed by action.
Yes, so true.
I also want to say that Mr. Bryan has one of the most important demographic areas in Cayman, which is where most of the business hub is in central Georgetown. And every opportunity should be afforded him, for assistance to make that area better. But once again, the Caymanian people continue to have less representation by their representatives. In Cayman, we clean our cisterns before the rains come to make sure that we remove all the dirt. Otherwise, all the fresh water that comes in will be contaminated. Last election, we had the chance to remove every PPM member and clean house. But because that was not done, the incompetent premier was able to meander his way back to the top and now demonstrates a total disregard for the very constitution he has helped to draft and implement. However, folks, all is not lost. And we have a process called People's Initiated Referendum. No more time for idle talk. It is time for positive action and real change. Let's get together collectively and get it done. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. Dr. McField, we're coming to you, and then we close off.
Yes, I want to say I have a closing. I have some closing material about the shadow cabinet, and I've read it. I'll read it now. Following the appearances of the Honorable Ezra Miller, Leader of the Opposition, and Deputy Opposition Leader Mr. Alba Suku, members of the Shadow Cabinet on this show, for the record, I have been requested by several of our listeners to explain what a Shadow Cabinet is. The history of British parliamentary democracy and cabinet system states that a shadow cabinet is consistent with a political party system with 2 or more competing factions where one party emerges with a parliamentary majority and has the voter mandate to govern by a cabinet of ministers. A shadow cabinet consists of a senior group of opposition spokesmen of the party who gained the next largest number of seats, led by their opposition leader, to form an alternative cabinet to that of the governing party cabinet. The members therefore shadow or mirror the positions of each individual member of the governing cabinet. It is a shadow cabinet's responsibility to criticize bad policies and actions of the government cabinet, as well as offering the country alternative policies and programs. In most democratic countries, members of the shadow cabinet are styled shadow ministers. The British cabinet system was fully instituted by Mr. Hugh Gaviskill, leader of the opposition in Parliament in 1951, to assist in opposing the policies of Sir Winston Churchill's government at that time. All portfolios in a shadow cabinet are assigned to shadow cabinet ministers by the leader of the opposition. Shadow cabinets provide an opportunity for a genuine operation of democracy in the legislative process. A shadow cabinet also prevents the enforcement of bad policies and programs by a government voting bloc in the legislative system and ensures that the actual constituency needs and values merit respect and legislative attention.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. McField. I just want to say to the listening and viewing audience that there was more that was said by Mr. Benson. I just read the introduction to it, but much more detail. I would encourage all of you who have an interest in this to go to the Legislative Assembly's website. You can Google search www.gov.ky, and then you choose government websites, then choose the Legislative Assembly, and then there is on the Legislative Assembly's website, the homepage, you will see Hansard's and publications, and you click on to that, and then you can look through the various years of those publications. And if you choose 1971, because that is when the debate took place in 1971 in relation to it, or you can, instead of Hansard publications, you do Hansard archives. Yes, Hansard archives instead of Hansard publications. Hansard archives, and you will see in there from the 1999 session, from the 1971 session to the 1999 session. So you can access that yourself. You click on to the 1971 session, and then you start to scroll down and you search, and you will see the Caymanian Protection Law and the debate that ensued on it. Meanwhile, for those of you who don't have the ability to do that, whenever the opportunity arises, we will continue to read from that, and I will make inquiries to see whether or not we can put this up on the website for our listeners and our viewers to access as well. It is important. They always say you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you're coming from. We need to know where we were coming from, what our legislators wanted at that point in time based on the specific conditions in the Cayman Islands, and it looks like we have gone full circle, 360 degrees, and we're right back in 2017 where we were in 1971. Now, whether or not the same remedies we need to use for that, or whether or not we need to take different approaches, you have heard Ms. Teresa talk about the fact that we need to have the conversation. Sometimes we need to start with the conversation, and maybe we haven't even gotten down that road yet. But we need to take a measured approach to this, because there are many players in the game. There are many players in the game. Those players that Mr. Benson spoke about that were not here yet, they're here now. So we have to include them in the conversation unless we want to be a divisive society, and we do not want that, because that is not good for any of us if we have that. So we all have to engage in the conversation. There has to be a conscious effort on everyone's part, foreigner and Caymanian, to make the Cayman Islands a place where we can all live in harmony, in peace, and we can all be successful in our own endeavors the way that we want to be successful. I say those words, folks, and I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. John Sterling, Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for Talk Today. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.